Rev Peter Williamson's time in ministry has seen him experience the church in Canterbury, the far north, and South Auckland. Trading standing in the courtroom for the pulpit, Peter's heart for vulnerable people has typified each church he has served in. Alongside his late wife of 45 years, Andrea, Peter has served the church diligently, never once to mince his words along the way. Retirement now beckons on the shores of Whangaparoa, where there are fish to catch and new encounters to be experienced.
Pete, how are you? It's great to have you here with us.
Good, thank you, Michael. It's good to be talking to you. Interesting times as we head towards retirement and withdrawal from church during this time of lockdown.
I have a few questions that we'll have a talk about, and I'd love to hear your insight as always. The first one, I'd love to touch on what was the experience like doing ministry alongside Andrea, a great mentor and friend to many people, including myself. How did you maintain the balance amongst ministry and family life?
It's looking back at a long-term marriage, 45 odd years of marriage together, and most of that was walking the Christian walk together, and that was awesome. We both went to Trinity Pakuranga a very long time ago now, and through some times away and times coming back, Andrea and I eventually became the parents of the youth group there. And we had this massive old house in Howick, and it was a great time together. That's where I came back to my faith after having spent some time away. And Andrea was the person that gently eased me back into that. And then together, from then on, we walked together in our faith, more in parallel tracks than completely together, except for that time as the parents of the Bible class youth group, and that was cool. I was a lawyer at the time. Andrea became a counsellor, but in a Christian-based counselling centre, and I candidated, became presbyter, and that's when we went down to Christchurch, and at that stage Andrea was a workplace chaplain, but doing counselling, not workplace chaplaincy. We moved to Whangarei. I was presbyter and Andrea was hospice chaplain. Come to Papakura and I was presbyter, but Andrea was police chaplain. So parallel tracks, but really close. She was part of my ministry and an influence on the songs we sang in church, but it was always part of a shared walk together. Andrea was then ordained. I think it was rushed through, and it was rushed through because she was quite ill at the time, but then seemed to pick up, and then was another several years before she died, and I, of course, still miss her. And so doing ministry now is a little bit different. It's not quite the same. But that said, that balance was done through a strong family life. We have 2 adopted children. They were always part of the first thing that we did. Andrea was a nag. She always said that Mondays were off without exception. And so that's why I bitterly resent the connection taking Mondays for meetings, and will duck out of them if at all possible. Monday fishing with Andrea was one of the highlights of my week, and she organised her work so that she had Mondays off as well. Shared interest in fishing, of course, and big old houses, and I'm about to go up to my new big old house in Whangaparoa. It's going to be an interesting time. It was going to be Andrea and my retirement house. It's now going to be the retirement house for myself and a whole bunch of new things that are happening for me, new friends, new relationships. So it's going to be an awesome time. Being a presbyter is an absolutely never-ending job. You can never get to the end of your to-do list. In fact, sometimes you don't even get past number 1 or 2 on that to-do list. And so it's really important to have that ability to say, I have done enough for this morning, or for this hour, or for this day.
It's noted in your record of retirement that you're an enthusiastic and committed member of the Evangelical Network. And it's a good question to ponder during these times. What do you believe the role of evangelism in Te Hahi should be today within the context of our New Zealand society?
I guess that one of the things I've adopted is something that I've picked up from the Walk to Emmaus, which was a very Americanized method of introducing Christian life to non-Christian people, a bit like Alpha. And in that, there was the prayer, guide and inspire me by your Spirit. And that's a prayer that I pray often, at every mealtime, at times when I need it. And so that inspiration of the Spirit is something that I really take seriously. Evangelism, I don't think there will ever be not the need for evangelism, but evangelism in the way of banging on, standing on a rubbish bin at a street corner and yelling and hectoring people into hearing the scripture is probably not a terribly helpful way of evangelism nowadays. I think that more my way of looking at evangelism is it requires both an internal and an external view of mirroring the way of Christ to people. I've got to have it reasonably right for myself before I can then say to others, this is a good way to live. And I think it is not so much hectoring other people, but by walking alongside them. I think that I have always had a heart for those at the bottom end of society, the drunks and the vulnerable people. And I've worked with them both professionally as a lawyer. I was one of the original child youth advocates. And as a probation officer, I specialized in drunks. And as a minister, I have worked often with those who both visit the church and are part of the church, those who are drunks, those who are vulnerable people. In Christchurch, my first parish, we gathered a small group of people who were vulnerable people together because they could support each other. And one lovely little old lady whispered in Andrea's ears, why does Peter keep having these drunks hanging around him? And it's a fair question. But that's who I was able to mirror the way of Christ to. Was it effective? Who knows? Some of them stayed at church. Some of them wouldn't darken the door of a church. That's not my job. My job is to mirror the way of Christ to them. But there's a couple of things that work alongside that. First of all, we've got to have a church that's worthwhile attracting people to. It's no use my saying, come and see me and others mirroring this way of Christ together, if my church or the church that I'm part of doesn't do that. And so part of my work as presbyter is encouraging people to walk that way of Christ in a way that is attractive, is worthwhile for other people to look at and say, yes, I want to be part of it. And the other thing is, and this is more of a society thing, and people who've been part of my connectional life recently will have heard me banging on about it, is that the way that we do our society at the moment discourages people from coming to church or even to churches' coffee bars. We build houses in little groups, lock them away behind gates, give them very little places to gather themselves, but discourage them from gathering in other places. And if I could find a way to get into those gated communities in a way that I could show that way of Christ, that would be great. But actually walking up and knocking on their doors, I don't think is the right way to do it. And I'm puzzled as to how to do it.
Reflecting on the multiple parishes and contexts all around Aotearoa in which you've served, what have been some of the greatest takeaways from your time in ministry?
Let me go through parish by parish. From Christchurch, I was taught by one of my mentors to have an excellent admin system as a presbyter. And I think that ability to go back and immediately put my hands on items from many years ago has been helpful throughout my ministry. And it sounds such a dopey thing, but it's been really helpful. The second thing from Christchurch is ecumenical relationships became very strongly seated in my ministry at that place, and I have carried that on throughout my ministry. So those two takeaways from Christchurch. Of course, there were many more, but those are the ones I want to underline today. Second, from Whangarei, is that it is easy to discover God's creation and God in creation in a place as beautiful as Whangarei. And that ability to walk alongside creation was something that became really special for me then and continues onwards forever. And the second thing at Whangarei is that I was always part of the social service provision of the church there through 155 Community House, and that social service provision to people has also become really important to me and has continued on throughout my ministry. From Papakura, what will I be taking away? I will be taking away the joy of a congregation who I can love and who loves me. And that's been truly special. And I feel for those presbyters who are not in that position. Again, part of the benefit of being part of a connectional church is that has allowed me to follow some of my interests as part of my presbyteral task. I'm a board member of the Prison Chaplaincy Board, and that has been seriously special. I've got to know a lot of people in prison during my time, and coming at it from a chaplaincy perspective has allowed me to to have another perspective on imprisonment, prisoners, and those that keep prisoners safe. And similarly allowed me to foster my interest in medical practice. I'm a director of a medical centre, and that means that it's a Christian-based medical practice, and that allows that combination of both my ministry, but also my interests as well. And a real John Wesley social service to boot. Being a presbyter has been a true privilege. I don't walk away from it completely, but I am glad to be able to say that this is an honourable retirement, and I look forward to younger presbyters taking up the challenge of a much more difficult situation for Methodist churches in our current society.
Well, Peter, I know you've listed many takeaways and things that you've received. There's also many things that you've given during your time, both you, Andrea, and your family, to the building of the kingdom and the work of Te Hahiwa Te Reana. And I want to thank you and honour you for your service. Enjoy your retirement. Enjoy your retirement with Ash. So all the best, Pete, in your retirement. Enjoy, because you deserve it.
Thank you, Michael.